Hey, good morning and welcome to Jetpack episode number 4. I'm your host, Jeff Hallish. Today is the season finale. Our next show will be on September 14th at a brand new time, noon Eastern, since a lot of people were complaining about how early it is, and I've had to have 4 cups of coffee just to keep going. So, no, we're excited to be here. You'll find the new dates and times below on the main video at itjetpack.com/watch-live. A reminder to join the chat by clicking the plus at the left of your screen. Join with us in chat, and you can see what's going on and talk to other techs in the field. You've all heard about cloud, this and that. Cloud, that many of us think the cloud is going to put us out of business. We talked about this a little bit in episode 1. We heard you wanted to hear more, so today we're going to talk cloud versus cloud and what that entails. We'll cover moving your customers' infrastructure to the cloud and what that means. We'll also talk about moving your customers' apps to the cloud and what that means. Before we get started, let's define cloud, though. Too often we talk about cloud as if it is anything not in your customer's environment, things like backup and email. But the real definition of cloud is fuzzy. What about Office 365, QuickBooks Online, and even things as simple as websites? Are those cloud? Depends on who you ask. Back in episode 1, Scott was talking about his experience with open source monitoring. Someone in the audience took exception, calling it a silly string of open source hacked together tools. So we invited him onto the show. Let me introduce him to you now. We have Chad Kempt from Fast Computers, and also joining us on the opposite side of the ring, we have Scott Young from Flexity. We also have joining us again Pierre Roman from Microsoft Canada, and a newcomer, Barry Campbell from Brightlink. And also our host with the most, Corey Fruitman from Instant Housecall. So let's get started. The cloud. What in the world does that really mean? Before we get started into the cloud portion, though, Chad, you watched episode 1, and you said Scott was using a silly string of open source hacked together tools. What did you mean by that?
Thanks, Jeff. Hearing what Scott was saying, I couldn't help but wonder how much time and resources he was dedicating from his team to working on their internal system to be able to monitor their customer systems, as opposed to having somebody already have done all the work for them and just implementing an already existing off-the-shelf solution. I didn't hear a whole lot about his exact solution. From what I gathered from bits and pieces, it seems like it's something based around Nagios. And I'm not sure how far he's extended that through additional programming and things like that. But
10 years worth.
10 years worth. See, having had a lot of experience with both, and then this isn't to say that open source in general is bad. That's not the case at all, right? We're talking about solutions that already exist and are really well built, and the barrier to entry cost-wise now is a lot lower than it was 10 years ago. So actually, Scott, maybe this is a question you could answer for me. If you were starting over today, or you were going from break-fix to MSP, or you're rewriting the ground up, would you go for one of the solutions that are already off the shelf today at the extremely low barrier to entry cost-wise, or would you still have preferred to build everything from the ground up?
Well, just as an addendum to the whole thing, as I said in episode 1, I am migrating to a pay at the moment. So, but that's for us because of the size we're at. And when you try to sell, no matter how custom your solution is, when you try to sell something that is perceived as open source to a certain size of customer, it becomes a very tough sell. So we've had no choice but to migrate off of what we're doing. But in order to do that, it's going to take us a long time because we have things so ingrained with reporting, with everything else. If I was going to go, depending on the size of what I was doing now, I always look at it that your people are your resources. Mm-hmm. You max out your people. I say 80%, that's my general rule. You get an 80% workload on a person. Beyond that, with spikes, with holidays, with sick days, with anything else, you're at 100% anyway on that person. So you get a person to 80%. If you can do it without a tool, open source or not, I don't see why you actually need the tool. The tool is there to help you. So at that 80% mark, I would say go to tools. At that 80% mark, when you're going to tools, then it really depends on what you're doing and how much you need. If there is an open source solution that will work just as well for you, I don't see why you wouldn't go for it. Now, if you do have to do a lot of customization for it, you don't have the people in shop, yes, that's a perfectly valid point that you're going to need to buy something, because where are you investing your time? Are you investing your time in something that's going to make you money? Or are you investing your time in something that in the future will make you money that someone else has already done?
Now, when you mentioned you know, buying it, investing in a tool that already exists. But what about the support side of it? The problem we had in the past was, let's say I have Joe Tech, who's just amazing, and he writes out a whole lot of stuff and expands the functionality of a base tool. Won't pick on any particular tool, just speaking generally. Then that tech leaves for whatever reason. The bus runs him over. He gets an offer from Google. He leaves, or Microsoft. He leaves. That sort of thing. If that happens, you have no support chain because your support was your guy that just left. With the proprietary off-the-shelf sort of solutions, you know, you call the vendor and you can get some support limp by until you get somebody else trained up, or send somebody through the academy training that they have. A long time ago, when we first started, we were very much open source everything. Back with Windows NT, instead of deploying Windows NT, we deployed Linux boxes. At the time, we were doing Stage 1 Bootstrap Gen 2 installs and other stuff. And we were using Samba, and back then it wasn't the Samba we have today, right? It was a lot of work to get to that point. But we did roaming profiles and all that kind of stuff. For firewalls, we didn't bother with Cisco. We were doing BSD-based solutions we were building, and the list kind of went on. The problem we had was, just like you mentioned about selling to certain size customers, I think it's across the board. Whenever there was a problem with the solution, instead of it being a problem that needed to be fixed, it was a problem with the solution we built, as opposed to, oh, that insert vendor name here. And so when we overnight kind of migrated off of that, we went to the Microsoft, IBM, Cisco route. We saw our revenues go up proportionally because we didn't have a lot of this sort of strung together, the silly string type of thing going on, for lack of a better way of putting it. So, I mean, in a company your size, I was thinking that it would be easier to support these sort of initiatives with a company the size of yours, because you potentially have, say, a team of people working on these solutions, and if you lose a couple guys from your team or one guy,
you've got a development team.
You've got a development team. So when you're small and you only got one, maybe two guys, it puts you in a different. So that's why I was getting at, if you were small, and you were starting out, and you were just you and a couple guys, 10 years ago, anybody who was around doing RMM, they know that they were cutting, 5-digit checks minimum for a handful of agents, because that's just what it cost. That would have been roughly when you were starting with your open source initiative, right? And now, I think you can get started for as low as like $50 a month on a few agents from a vendor.
But it also depends on what your target market wants from you and what you're doing.
So do you find your customers care about that?
Yes, we do. We do a lot of custom stuff because we've got every customer we have. Well, not every customer. Many customers are in many different verticals, and they have different things that they need done for them, or very specific ways in which they do things. If we're taking over management of a customer, they already have an IT team in general, and they keep that IT team that becomes the architecture. So they're deploying things that we're supporting. So how they deploy it dictates how we must support it. So an off-the-shelf piece of software for monitoring or management doesn't necessarily help us that much, because in the ways that they do things or the ways that they build things, it may not be anywhere close to standard, or it may be a mix of Microsoft and a mix of Linux. It may be they have their own custom scripts and things like that they're doing together. So for us to be able to support them in the way that they build, and we can recommend all we want, and we do. But when you work with a certain size customer, you can recommend, and they decide to go their own way. Once it's deployed, if we want to keep the contract, we then have to support it in the way that they have built it.
So just so we're on the same page, can you give me some examples of the type of stuff you would be expecting your RMM tool to do for your service delivery for these clients?
It really totally and utterly depends on the client. We've got clients where we build private clouds for, and we have to fully go in and have. Now we've migrated that over to VMware, so we go through VMware's cloud, and we have to do the provisioning. So they've got their front end, they can request the machines, we then present them. They had a cloud requirement, but they also had a requirement that data couldn't be outside of Canada, data couldn't be here, data couldn't be there, didn't want to go into any of the big players, wanted to keep it all in-house with their own backup solution, so we had to manage that for them. And that's managing and monitoring the cloud. Then we go to other customers where we've got some of the banking verticals where they've got a whole bunch of custom, many year built in-house tools that some of them are on terminal machines, fax machines even in some cases, that haven't yet been shut down. Some of it's on IBM with Linux, some of it's on the old mainframes that now run Linux, on Windows machines, and so tying this all together, when you're going into a customer's network, if we get to, hey, greenfield, build up something from the ground up, great. not a problem. That can fit into anything that we can buy off the shelf. If we're going into someone who's had 10, 15, 20, 30 years of history in their stuff, it becomes much more challenging.
So you're saying basically you end up buying off the shelf, and then you're still spending a ton of time developing around the APIs in order to try to make it work in the way you want it to work anyway.
Or we're buying off the shelf and then buying another off the shelf to fix something else, and then buying another off the shelf to fix something else, and then tying them all together, and then one of them breaks, and then who points at what finger? Then we have the problem.
So in your case, sometimes actually development-wise, it may actually take less development time to roll out from the start something totally custom as opposed to having to, like you said, buy, because then we're factoring in all those costs as well, right?
Yep.
All those things you're buying, and they don't run themselves. I mean, I hope nobody expects that you're going to go buy an off-the-shelf piece of software, double-click next, and now you're an MSP monitoring and managing networks. That's not quite how it works either.
Not even close.
Yeah, I was going to say, but a lot of people, that is what they do believe as far as being an MSP or starting off the MSP route, is they believe that they can just get that off the shelf piece of software and use it to monitor, and they just kind of set it and forget it, and that's not really what managed services is about, you know. No. And a lot of the problems, even from some of the off-the-shelf stuff, and I've only got a little bit of time with some of these things, but it seems to me, even when you're doing scripts and different things like that, there tends to be things that break, and so you still have those problems where you got to figure out how I'm going to support XYZ customers. So I can actually see the benefits of both sides with what Scott's doing and with what you're doing, Chad, because again, the whole reason we started this Jetpack was to talk about the different size businesses and different solutions that different people could use. To be honest, I was excited to hear that somebody had actually is with a big company and was able to basically build this up using open source tools. But I understand your point too, where if something happens to that person who's set that infrastructure up, to use a technical term, then what that means is now what do you do? And so there are good and pros and cons to both solutions, I think.
Well, I'm talking about that, just giving you experience from 10 years of running this. It's a way to form the people that you have doing your development and documentation. You have to have them build in a structured model and document well, because you're always going to lose people. You're always going to lose people. And if they're the only ones who know that script, you're really without a paddle there. You've got to go in and learn it from the ground up and figure it out. If you have the documentation, if it's built in a structured manner, you're good.
Well, that makes sense. However, the one nice thing is if you're using XYZ vendor's product and you post a thing on insert job, forum looking for work type of thing, you can actually hire somebody that already is an expert of X number of years with product platform XYZ. I would be surprised if you found somebody that was an expert with yours. You'd probably want to know where they got access to it.
Not necessarily with my platform, but then on the other hand, I can find people who are experts with Nagios, and I can find people who are experts in the scripting languages and structures that we use. So you can come at it from the other angle.
I mean, looking at it both ways, and in the interest of full disclosure on that, Nagios does have a support model as well, right? I mean, obviously, and actually, it's not cheap either. So I mean, to make Nagios
to do the bottom end of it.
I think is it 2,000 for the bottom? Yeah. So it's not terribly expensive depending on how many nodes you have, but at the same time, it's not free either. Like, I mean, it can be, but if you want support, there is some money there. No,
actually, surprisingly, there are things that the free model does that the paid one does not do well.
Really?
We have got across those. This is frustrating. I actually paid for something and it does less than the open source one.
Because they don't want to support it. Probably.
They didn't want to support that functionality that was hacked into it. Yes, even though it's fully in the other code train.
That's great. No, actually, and even on the paid model, the paid systems, without getting into specific systems, we have switched platforms in the past because we found that we had a guy that had to be dedicated to the platform not because the platform broke per se, but more it just required a lot of maintenance. Did it have a lot of flexibility? Yes. But
even in the paid model we're moving towards, we're going to have people dedicated, and it's just at that point it's size.
And just so we're being clear, when I'm assuming we're on the same page, when we say dedicated, we don't mean people dedicated to serving the customers with this. Literally dedicated to working on the product.
Dedicated to working on the product, updating new customers coming in, making sure functionality is working, making sure scripts are there. Yes, like dedicated, you make this platform run.
Exactly. So we actually, and that was actually a reason why we moved platforms in the past, was to get away. We lost a little bit of functionality, but our target market under 100 seats. We are looking at these clients, and really, what are we delivering? We want to deliver really good patch management, third-party and Microsoft first-party things. We want to deliver the ability to monitor on hardware alerts and things like that, and we want to do asset tracking and a little bit of license management. But some of the really more complicated things. Well, see, and we wanted a single pane of glass is the other thing, right? We want to be able to log in one shot and see all customers in one thing, right? That's the and that's the thing. So actually, on patch management, Nagios doesn't do patch management, does it?
No, we actually have instances of Service Center at different customers depending on what we're doing in certain things. It really depends. We use also, when we're doing monitoring, we have what's called a statement of exercise. So we have custom-built tools to run this, but a statement of exercise effectively states that on X date or X time, however often you're going to do it, you are going to do this set of tasks. So you can then customize how you're going to control it. It'll give you the reminder to the team will go and execute the tasks. So if you have to do manual things, such as certain systems doing patch management on them, you're reminded to go out at this time, do all these checks against the different vendor sites, against different security sites, make sure everything's up to date, do everything, make sure it's tested, and then close off on that task. So no matter how automated you get, there's always going to be manual.
I completely agree with that. Same thing with firmware on printers and servers and things like that. You're not going to automate. I hope you're not going to automate that. I mean,
I can't see any problems with that at all.
I guess you could, but yeah. So essentially though, and as far as the scripting and stuff goes, what we found actually a really simple way for us to be able to grow our script library for custom things that actually can traverse platforms if we do switch. Hopefully not again, but if we do. Is you can write them in standard scripting languages and you can just push them through the RMM. So instead of having to have it custom built into the RMM, it's just a separate set of scripts, whether we're talking about PowerShell or something as simple as a patch script, anything
Ours
really.
Is doing this, the same thing even with the new one that we're buying, where yes, the monitoring system should be able to trigger a separate script, and then you call our script library.
Exactly, and then you can build it out that way. Now, what about things like for ticketing systems? Does your current system flow into and automatically create tickets and stuff, or did you guys write that yourself, or?
Yes, and that is part of the migration. Why it's taking so long to do the migration, because you have to have that flow through, as well as there's reporting that's tied into these things. So when you're migrating a series of customers, you have a certain set of expectations. When you migrate them to a new tool, you have to keep all of their expectations before you worry about growing into the new functionality that that tool may or may not give you. Because if they get something one month, the next month they don't, that customer could be very angry. So the migration of that, and making sure that all of the scripting that ties together the ticketing system and the monitoring system, the reporting functionality that comes out, the automatic reports that we pump out to the customers every month against the ticketing system, as well as against the monitoring system, because that's what ties together a lot of the SLAs. You have to be able to pull out from the monitoring system when something went wrong, and pull out from the ticketing system when the ticket was created and when it was acted upon, to be able to show the customer that you are meeting those SLAs that you've committed to. So a lot of that takes time.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with all that. And so it's pretty much exactly what I thought. I mean, the system sounds like, except for the fact that you said you had customers that wanted something more. Mm-hmm. Actually, that's a good question. Do your customers actually care what you're running as your tool?
Generally, up until now, we've had a pretty good track record of no. But we're starting to get into certain size customers where, yes, they want to know what the back end is. They don't care how you modify it. It just has to work against your SLAs. But they do look at, well, either we're running our own customized open source, and what you're saying your open source is better than my open source, or they're saying we're paying X amount per month on this licensing already for our own stuff. You're telling me that your open source is better. I just don't believe you. And it's a mentality of a certain size and certain silo company. It tends to be a lot of the financial institutions.
So that's not you wouldn't call that a sales problem at all? Like, you don't think that's an objection that can be handled by the sales team type of thing?
To some extent, but as I said, with our development team that we have, I can get them better use out of them at this point on just dedicating them to the scripting. Exactly. Instead of worrying about the other, because I've grown to that point. I've got the objections. Why bother have sales fight that battle when I could just say, okay, fine.
I agree.
I do have a question. What does SLA stand for?
Support level objective.
Okay.
Sorry, SLO is objective. SLA is effectively you're saying that you're dedicating something. There's actually a monetization, a money penalty against it.
Service
agreement,
level agreement,
for
basically.
the A.
Yeah, the A, which means what you've committed to and what the customer can expect, and if you don't meet it, they typically will be either a financial chargeback or something like that.
Gotcha. So like a contract.
Well, it's within the SLA is within the contract. The SLO is an objective, so they can't hold you to it.
I'm just kidding. No, I do. I just wanted everybody to know, what we're talking about, because sometimes we throw around acronyms all the time, and not everybody in the industry knows exactly what those acronyms are. So,
fair enough.
Just to make it clear to everyone. Wow. So yeah. So the benefits. Well, I'll say this. Both the ways that you guys are doing your MSP model is basically what I'm hearing is that you have to know whatever it is, whatever software you're using, whether it be open source or a paid-for platform, to be able to do what you need to do. And you need to know the back end of it. You need to know how to make your adjustments and do different things with that in order to support your customer. So I guess there's different levels of doing, the MSP model. And so yeah, I can see. Wow, it's very interesting to hear, Scott's side where, he's talking about he has a team that's dedicated to, adjusting the software and doing what they need to do per customer. And then, Chad, with your solution of using a platform, where you can basically look at everything all at once and, it's doing the things that you need it to do for your customer. I think it's just different ways of definitely supporting people in the industry.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, so I was going to ask Corey about this, but he dropped off. So I think we've covered it. Is there anything, Chad? Is there anything else you wanted to ask, or?
No, I think I actually have a really good understanding of a position. There comes Corey.
I was going to ask Corey. We're going to talk about take a few minutes before we get into the cloud session, but talk about managing your own hardware versus cloud hosting. and I thought that this might be perfect. Corey, can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. So we're talking about managing your own hardware versus cloud hosting. And can you tell us a little bit about the pros and cons of that?
I mean, in terms, I think I've obviously got a bit of a bias. I sell a cloud service, so I'm very cloud oriented. But I'm assuming that you're giggling because of what happened earlier in the day. Is that right?
Yes, exactly.
I'm sorry. I'm dropping off and on because my my physical hardware is giving me trouble right now. So earlier in the day, the cloud server that's running this this website, which is AWS, suddenly spiked to 100% CPU, and it wouldn't stop. So we were having some trouble there. Now I think I have to apologize. I missed the precursor because I was rebooting my physical device while I was doing this. So I think what Jeff's point is that there's problems with the cloud in terms of there's something going on out in the cloud, and you can have you can have difficulty, for example, like we had earlier today, where I wasn't able to stop the server. And I'm guessing that your point is that I could have pulled the plug if it was a physically on-prem one, which is true. But it would also be located down at 151 Front Street. I'd have to drive there. I'd have to physically pull the plug. The advantage here was that I was able to spin up another server in order to fix the problem and get the website going back on again. So I mean, I could host my own stuff. It wouldn't be that hard to do. But to me, the benefit of being able to literally, make another server out of thin air in order to fix problems like this that happen completely unexpectedly, for me, that's the advantage to cloud.
Corey, can I ask a question?
Mm-hmm. Are you going to take a dig at AWS right now?
No, I'm not. No, I'm not at all. You should know me by now. This is not my style.
No, you're more than welcome to.
I would.
Yeah, I would too.
No, we'd rather take the high road. But what I was about to say is your web service or your website, is it only one instance running or multiple instances?
So for Jetpack, there's only Right. So for Jetpack, there's only one instance running.
Okay.
So my guess is you're going to talk about the difference between IaaS and PaaS, right?
No, not really. Because you can have the same load balancing and the same type of resource allocation, whether or not you're on IaaS or PaaS. And I don't know how AWS does it on their end, but for Azure, for example, if you only have like all the SLAs that we talked about with Scott earlier, SLAs and SLOs, for a cloud service, if you want your cloud service to actually be supported and be able to respond to failure, I'm trying to find the politically correct to say when your server craps out. You actually have to have multiple instances. So for you to have only one instance of the site, it's still considered in cloud terms to be a development site.
Oh, okay. That's an interesting point. And that's so. Can anybody talk to that a little bit in more detail of basically the on-prem, self-host versus the cloud, where how can you stop things from happening like we had this morning when the IT Jetpack website wasn't working?
I mean, I can speak to it from an AWS perspective. There's a bunch of different ways that you can do it, but I think it's important to note, and Pierre can probably talk to this better than I can, or can definitely talk to this better than I can. But there's a difference between the models of AWS and Azure. So on the AWS side, you could have multiple instances. You can actually set up, as Pierre mentioned, you can set up things like load balancing, but it's not packaged the same way as it would in a PaaS service. So. It's a little bit more self-serve. Like you'd have to set up the instances and then create the load balancer. I'm pretty sure there's actually some self-healing stuff that you can do there. It's a little outside of my own personal wheelhouse, but I don't know.
Hey, Corey.
Yeah.
Corey, on that, if you wanted to do it with using AWS as the example, you could actually use a Beanstalk. And Beanstalk, basically, you just upload your site and your database, and it does all the back end for you. They have a really funny video where it shows a robot doing your job for you, but it's basically the bottom line is it sets up all that for you, so you don't need quite the skill set. Back to the original issue though is there's, as far as being able to troubleshoot that, you're kind of at the mercy of it was automatically working. To touch on the on-prem though, I have a bunch of use cases where on-prem still makes a lot of sense. If you have a client that has, say, 25 users, and they're on a T1, and that's the best internet you can get them, and they're paying $600 a month for that T1, and they're out in the middle of nowhere, and they have an inventory system, some line of business apps, etc. And to put all those in the cloud and have 25 users fight for the bandwidth of one T1, it would be the most awful experience. I mean, I don't care how great the uptime is and everything. It's just an awful experience. You put those in-house, they can access them locally at gigabit or whatever land speeds, and everything is great. Is their internet any better? Not really, but it doesn't matter because all those users can work locally. That's a huge case for running local on-prem servers versus cloud. And I'm not sure that anyone can,
Actually, I gotta agree with that. This has been our story from the very beginning in terms of the story of the three clouds: the private cloud, the hybrid cloud, and the public cloud. And we truly believe that not every solution has or needs to be moved to the cloud. And I think we're the only cloud provider out there that actually offers the full service to private, to hybrid, to public in a consistently managed manner from one end to the other. So I completely agree that not everything can be moved to the cloud, and sometimes it's because of technology, such as the T1 shared for 25 people. Sometimes it's because of regulations. Maybe you've got info on there that your own professional body or the government or state, whether it's state, federal, provincial government, may put restrictions on what type of information you need to put on the cloud, and so on. So we're fully aware and fully agreement that not everything can and needs to be put onto the cloud.
Yeah, I think one of the issue becomes is that the general public treats the cloud like it's a taxi cab, right? They're paying for that ride, and they're not thinking about the liability. They're not thinking about the maintenance of that vehicle. They're not thinking about the driver and his life and all that stuff. Whereas cloud is more like a lease. You know, you're leasing that car. You still are responsible for maintaining it. You're still responsible for keeping it on the road, for keeping it insured, and fixing it if something happens to it. I think that's the biggest problem, is that the industry has made the cloud this magical thing that's just going to fix all their problems and they can do anything with, but the reality is very different, and I think we have a responsibility to show them that it's different.
Absolutely. Actually, this is one of the most common myth that I've run across. I've been traveling all the way across Canada talking to user groups of any size across the country and talking about cloud, and that is one of the number one myth, is that if somebody puts in a VM in the cloud, that they don't have to manage it and they don't have to patch it. And I keep telling them, everything that's inside that VM is your responsibility. We don't touch it. We don't know what's in it. We don't want to know what's in it. Once you spin up a VM in Azure, anything inside that VM is yours. And you have to manage it the same way you manage any other machines, whether they're physical or VMs that you're managing on your site.
Well, I think part of the misconception a lot of times is we want to have, again, in this society, we're a microwave society, we want to basically have something we can set up and we don't have to really manage it. And it's, you know, there's a reason that it's called managed services, or that you call yourself a managed service provider, because you are managing those services. What we're expecting, I think, a lot of times is for us to be able to get a piece of software, or, you know, set up a VM on a server, and basically it's managed for us. But that's really, I mean, it's counterintuitive to what we actually need to be doing, and I think that's the misconception out there when it comes to you know, cloud in itself.
I think I'm going to have to correct you on that. Azure is not a managed service; it's a cloud service.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. Good point.
So if you want a managed service, talk to Scott or
yeah, exactly. And I guess that was my point. Is we need to basically take control of whatever we're putting out there for our customer base. We need to be able to take care of our customers in a fashion that they need to be taken care of. But it's not just we're going to set something up. It's not a set it and forget it and we're done. You know, and I think a lot of people are looking to the cloud for that type of service, and it doesn't exist. We still have to do the same things that we've been doing with on-prem stuff. You know, it's not a whole lot different.
The problem from a managed services perspective is that we're put in a position where we have to undo the millions of dollars of marketing that the cloud service providers have invested. So our clients see this as the holy grail that's going to fix all their problems, and we have to explain to them what works, because the reality is the cloud does work. We all know that, but where does it work and how does it work? You know, one of the things that we're trying to put together is a cloud readiness assessment where we can work with our clients to assess, you know, what are the applications that they have and what of those applications can be put to the cloud and they can leverage cloud for their business, and what just doesn't make sense.
I think that's a great point, Barry. Again, it's different, different strokes for different folks, right? You've got to have the different solutions depending on who your customer base is, and guess what? Not all your customer base is going to be identically the same, even though that would be easier, but that's just not a reality.
Well, and there's some MSPs out there that try to do that,
sure.
And there's nothing wrong with that. And in my experience, they're probably more profitable than those of us that are trying to put together custom solutions, because they can cookie cutter it, right? They can make every solution the same, but there's room for everybody. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that solution, and there's nothing wrong with building custom solutions either.
Right. Well, and I think when we talk about the managed service provider that's doing everything from soup to nuts, basically is coming in and designing the whole network, all the workstations, and they have a supplier that they're getting everything from, and they're leasing that equipment to the company. The problem is, I think there's a lot of businesses out there that, let's face it, even if they do have money for an IT budget, a lot of times, for whatever reason, a lot of people just don't want to spend it because they don't see the real benefit when whatever they already have is working, sort of. And to a lot of people, it just seems like that's good enough, right?
The other issue I've seen is some of the highly available cloud solutions. While they are absolutely highly available and it's great, sometimes for a small shop that doesn't make sense. When you can, if you have a 5 or even a 10, we'll say a 5-person shop, and you can stick a server in there installed for, I'll just throw a number out there and say $2,500 with a little RAID 1 array set and a USB hard drive on top of it backing it up. Is that an ideal solution? Is that highly available? No, not at all. Without playing the acronym game and going about RTO and RPO and everything. The bottom line is that if that server blows up, you're going to be spending the better part of a day recovering it from USB. It's not going to go to dissimilar hardware. It's going to need to be the same hardware. So even if you have a next business day warranty on that, which you can do like a 5-year warranty in that price, it's going to be a next business day before they even show up to do the warranty repair. So you could have literally 2 days of downtime. Now, if you're a mom and pop shop and that is just an internal system and you're okay running on pen and paper for the 20 transactions a day you do, then maybe that is acceptable. And spending a couple $100 a month or more on a cloud server, and then maybe the firewall in order to connect with a VPN, or literally having it in the public cloud on the internet, maybe those aren't the best plans for that business. So I think having all the different options is still really important, and I think that's something that going forward we need to continue to see. And Microsoft supports small businesses with their foundation server. I mean, that's a 15-user license. They're obviously not expecting that to be on big hardware. So, I mean, there is that expectation that there is still a spot for that in the low end of the market.
Yeah, that's a good point. Chad, now you have a lot of it. We're going to go off in another subject. You have a lot of experience with Office 365, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so can you explain, because a lot of people some people are irritated at a lot of these cloud services because they're having to spend now a monthly payment versus before, hey, I just buy the $400 or $500 piece of software and keep it for 15 years, and I'm good with that. Can you explain the benefits of what you've seen as far as your customers and the experience with Office 365?
Sure. I'm going to touch on a couple other points in here at the same time, so just get me back on track if I veer too much. Okay. But we had Microsoft Small Business Server was a big product for us and a lot of people for the past over a decade. And when that got announced that it was being killed off, a lot of us were really upset. We're like, what are we going to do? Our cheap on-prem Exchange solution is now gone. And essentially, SBS was a love it and hate it product. Anybody that did all the Microsoft best practices was horrified at the fact that we had Active Directory, Exchange, and all these other services on one box. It was the scariest thing ever. But from a licensing standpoint, it was the best thing ever. So
from the licensing standpoint, it was the best thing ever. From the support standpoint, if one thing went down, it took everything down with it.
And anytime you wanted to do anything that wasn't available in the wizard, you broke the wizards. So the thing is, the moral of the story here is that a lot of IT providers, and I'm going to say a lot because this was us and then other people we talked to, maybe Barry as well, I'm not sure. They thought Microsoft's plan at that point, we thought, was to just stick it to us and basically take all our customers. And they announced this by saying that, guess what, everybody? You need to give all your customers' information to us, including their credit card. We're going to bill them directly for their Exchange service, and figure something else out. Now, the thing is that looking back, hindsight's 20/20, and looking at where we came from and where we are now, I can see they were playing a bit of a long game. And now, today, with Office 365, you have several different models that you can actually buy, and I'll touch on those in a second. What I want to address is that No, that's not the case. There is, Essentials if you want a low-cost licensing option. All the CALs are built in, the client access licenses, which you'd normally have to buy depending on how many users there are going to be on the server. So ballpark, I think it's around $500 gets you a Server 2012 R2 with 25 client access licenses built in. And that is ballpark less than half for sure of buying a regular Server 2012 license and stacking it up. So you do that, and then you put the customer on Office 365 for their mail and other things. And one of the really nice things you end up with out of that is you end up with single sign-on to an extent. So what that means is you have your password locally on Windows, and it gets synced to your mail account. So change your password locally, and it gets changed in the cloud. And again, that was a thing that initially was a really big thing to set up and made sense for a very large installment, but didn't make sense for a small customer. Now, and actually there's a preview piece coming out that's even simpler, it's very simple to set up. So back to Office 365 and why you want to keep paying for it. What we've seen in the industry is when people have the option to buy the software license and keep it forever, they do. And then we end up with these nightmare migrations. I don't think anybody will argue that it would be easier to go XP, Vista, 7, 8, 10, as opposed to going XP 8 or XP 10 or something. The migration path is just a lot simpler if you continue to keep things current. So likewise with Office, if you're on Office 365 and you have the full suite and you have the Office desktop applications, they continually stay up to date. You don't ever run into that problem where somebody's running some antiquated stuff, it can't be migrated over to the new computer with the new OS, it doesn't work, etc. So getting back to the billing model that I wanted to talk about, this is huge. Something got announced about a month ago, maybe 2 months ago. It's called Cloud Service Provider. So initially, what happened was if you wanted to sell your customers Office 365, you could charge them for implementation and some service, but you had to be billed directly by Microsoft. The problem with this was a lot of MSPs want to bill one price per user, and they want to include all of the different costs in that, whether it's backup, firewall, mail, etc. When you have to have the customer get billed by Microsoft, it throws a giant wrench in the plans. So they came out with volume licensing, open license. And that was great because we could buy it through distribution and we could bill the customer. But the problem was the customer could go direct to Microsoft and pay monthly. And if they came to me, I had to bill them annually. So there was, and if I was dealing with an MSP client, I had to take some risk and buy a year's worth of this thing and hope that the contract held up. So the reason why CSP or Cloud Service Provider model is so amazing is you buy it through distribution and it's billed monthly. And you can add and remove seats on a monthly basis. And in addition to that, they have a different pricing model, whether you want to do the support for your customers or whether you want the customer to have Microsoft support. Again, very, very, very new stuff and terrific. You want to bundle that? No problem. That is pretty much the Office 365 mail and the desktop option, because that CSP can be used for any of them, whether it's E3, which is a whole bunch of different pieces, the desktop suite, mail, link, SharePoint, whether it's just mail or whether it's just the desktop software, you can build them all the same way.
And let's make sure that when you say desktop software, you really mean is like MS Office Suite.
Yes, that is exactly what I'm referring to. Sorry if that wasn't clear. Yes, and that you also have the Office Suite online as well, but I'm talking specifically about the installed desktop Microsoft Office Professional.
Yeah, which is 5 machines per
user.
Per user.
And it doesn't discriminate on operating system either. So if you have a customer that has a PC at the office, a laptop they use, but at home they have a Mac, they can install Office on their Mac, and they can install the as long as it's that user's PC, no sharing.
So this sounds like a month. Yeah, I think a lot of us were taken aback in the beginning, like you said, but I think this is something that is valuable moving forward. Is tax, people in the the IT field. A lot of times we always want to have the the latest greatest version of the piece of software, right? Because we're geeky like that. But for a lot of people, they don't really care. They're like, hey, I just heard somebody saying that they were looking for an ISO for Office 2000 or now Word 2002, and I'm like, this is just the other day, and I'm like going, why?
Yeah, exactly.
2002. Does that exist?
XP. It'd be
it was
XP.
XP. Yeah, it was XP. Yeah, it was Word. Which I had an ISO. I still do have an ISO for it actually. But it's like, there's just no way. But a lot of customers, they get, there's still a lot of customers I see on 2003, and and it's like, and sometimes even going back to support some of that stuff, I forget because I'm on 2013, and it's like, oh wait, how do I forgot how to do this, and so I like to keeping up to date, and I wish. I think this is a way that everybody can do that now because of the monthly payment, which is what a lot of people are really used to in today's day and age, right?
Well, the opportunity from an MSP perspective now to talk about cloud and how we can use it in the businesses that we already have is that we can do what Chad talked about and offer a single price. So we can combine all of these tools that people are using anyways and give them an affordable price for all of those products. The challenge, to speak to always having the updated version, I can't believe I'm being the yin to Chad's yang here, but one of the challenges that we run into is that we have a lot of integration. So we have a lot of third-party apps that integrate with Office. And so the challenge that we have is as we have to push forward, we lose some of those integrations.
Okay.
Pierre. So that's one of the challenges that we run into. So we have to put more pressure onto those third-party application providers and push them to support the newer versions faster and sooner. So I think that's going to be the biggest challenge as more and more people move to Office 365 for their MS Office desktop products. It's going to be a bigger challenge.
Barry, can you not specify but clarify when you say you want the third-party vendors to support newer version faster? What exactly do you mean by that?
One of our key verticals, I've worked in the legal industry for over 15 years, and in an IT, I'm not a lawyer. So you don't cut me off. For example, we've got a lot of applications that do document management. So in order to support those, they plug into Office. And when you hit save, there's a window that comes up and allows you to put in the document information so that the next lawyer or assistant that needs to access that document can do so, or they can search to locate those documents. So that's one example of an application that is vital to our clients, and they require that integration. And when we upgrade, we will often break it. So that's a challenge.
Okay.
I've actually seen that. I know exactly what Barry's talking about. Actually, if you even Act, the latest version didn't work with the Office 365 desktop software for the longest time. They wouldn't officially support it, and then if you tried to run it, it was hit or miss. Sometimes, for example, you'd hit generate a quote, and it would just error when it tried to open Word, and it has to do with the click to run versus the actual installed version. I think once the third-party vendors start working with click to run, pick a version, I don't think we're going to have as much of an issue going forward, but a lot of them seem to be supporting, the older style and a little slow on the uptake. But I mean, be that as it may. Something else actually interesting, Barry. You host your own Exchange server for your clients, do you not?
We do, yes.
So why did you not just put everybody on Office 365 because it's the best?
Well, wow. I'm not going to talk about the outage that we had last week, but no, that's not why. So again, going back to law firms being a key vertical for us, they are a regulated industry, self-regulated but regulated nonetheless, and so they have certain requirements that they have to meet. And we're in the province of Alberta. Every province and state has their own law society that makes up their own rules for their membership. So one of the challenges was that in Alberta, we don't have a requirement. The lawyers don't have there's no rules as far as cloud. There's guidelines. And like any self-regulated industry, nobody wants to step too far out of line because then it may force regulation. So the Law Society prefers to say, for example, in Alberta, they say, we prefer to have your data in Canada, and we have an even stronger preference for your data to stay in Alberta. So from our perspective, losing chain of custody, not being able to guarantee who and what can access that information, it was a big reason why we had to do something. I mean, for us, we didn't feel that Microsoft was trying to eat our lunch. We more felt that Microsoft was putting us in a tough spot for those clients that we had that were regulated. Well, I know that there's. Sorry, go ahead, Pierre.
I was going to say in Canada, because I know that you are in the prairies, there are no laws that prevent any company or organization from putting their data into public cloud. However, there are rules and regulations that states how you must deal with public cloud depending on the type of information and the type of usage you're going to do by the cloud. So if you're in healthcare or in a lawyer or anything like that, and you've got PII, so personally identifiable information as part of the data, well, you have to prove that you're doing encryption, that you're doing risk assessment, that you have doing all these things before you're allowed to put it in the cloud, which is all good, because in the end it's to protect the person whose information that is.
Absolutely. But then
so
it goes beyond that too, though. I mean, you have, you've got jurisdictional issues. So, for example, if we're just going to stick with lawyers, it's what I know. And this goes into other industries as well. But with jurisdictional issues, you have if, for example, I complain about my lawyer and I think he's ripping me off, and I can make a complaint to my local law society. The law society has to have immediate access to that data. They have to be able to get it. And if the service is down, whatever service you might be using for hosting that information, if that service is down, they can't get it in a reasonable time, and the lawyer would be found in violation. Also, depending on the service that you're using, there's metadata. If they can't get the metadata, if they're getting a copy of the information that's in the file, but not the metadata that's included with the file, that's important as well. There's the chain of custody. Who can access this and how can they access it? Talking about jurisdictional issues again, there's a really interesting case that's in the courts right now. And Pierre, maybe you're aware of it. A lot of people aren't. But it's Microsoft versus the United States of America. So the U.S. Law enforcement is trying to compel Microsoft to produce information that's in Microsoft's Irish data center. So they want to get access to someone's Hotmail account. And Microsoft is saying, no, we're in the U.S. If you want to access this data that's located in the Irish data center, you need to go through EU courts and abide by the EU security and privacy laws. And the courts in the U.S. are saying that no, if you can access the information, we don't care where it is. If you can access it, you have to produce it. Now, Microsoft's being the good guy here, and they're taking this all the way, and I suspect it's going to go to the Supreme Court before we get a real answer. But
we actually lost the first round on that one, and basically declared ourselves in contempt of court because we decided not to produce the information. But we appealed that ruling, and now we're moving to the next iteration of the court system.
Exactly. And I don't mean to say this as I'm not attacking Microsoft, and I mean I'm happy that they're doing the right thing. The challenge is that this is way bigger than Microsoft, and this impacts all cloud services providers, both in the U.S. and internationally. And
yes. But if that mailbox was hosted, let's say, on your server in your own data center, and the FBI wanted it, or the NSA, or whoever three-letter acronym wanted to use it, or four-letter acronym in Canada.
Good old CSIS, yeah.
CSIS, RCMP. Anyway, all they need still is a court order, and then they can knock at your door, whether or not you're a hoster or a cloud service.
Absolutely. I mean, in Canada, for us, we though can report that to our client, to our customer. In the U.S., they don't have to report that, or the court can compel them not to report it.
Actually, on that one, every time those three-letter acronyms have tried to get access to the information of our customers without allowing us to disclose it to our customers, every time we've taken them to court, and every time they've retrieved or withdrawn the warrant.
Okay, I don't want to get into a discussion about that. I want to take it bigger.
It's important. Right? It's important for people to know that cloud providers. It's not a gimmick. We're not trying to pass a fast one on people. We are actively trying to ensure that privacy and your right to own your own data. We don't look at the data. We don't scan the data. We don't index the data for any purpose. Like whatever is in that storage account is yours and your own.
I know, Peter.
We duplicate it for resiliency, and that's it. But there is this perception out there that cloud service there's a backdoor. The NSA's got a backdoor to any cloud service. That is a myth. They sue us all the time to get access to it, and we win all the time because they don't have proper grounds to access it.
Well, yeah, and I'm not singling out Microsoft at all. What I'm trying to speak to is the greater ramifications of this specific case that's happening.
No, I understand that.
Yeah, so my concern becomes, and just like any other, really the larger cloud service providers, is that they've got that geographical redundancy. So I put my systems into the cloud, and now I don't care. Maybe I don't care where it is, or I don't think about it. I don't plan for it. I know with a lot of services you can identify the data center that you're storing your data in, but maybe I don't identify that I want to go to a specific data center. So the problem becomes now, if the U.S. is taking this stance, well, what happens on the flip side? What happens if and then if I'm using a cloud service that works on top of one of those core services, it gets even more convoluted. So I'm using a line of business application that is provided by a service provider, a software as a service provider. They have an office in Hong Kong. The Chinese government goes to their office and says, I want to access this data that's located in your data centers in Europe, and you have to produce this to me. Look, here's some case law that happened in the States, and they allowed it, so we want to do the same thing. So that's my concern more than anything. I'm not saying it's anything against Microsoft.
I think what you're saying, is it could set a precedence, but we kind of need to move on, guys. A lot of this stuff that we're talking about, it shows both sides of the coin, and basically you have to know your customer base. You've got to be able to do what's best for them. And depending, so there are still going to be situations, I think, where you're going to use, like Barry was saying earlier, on-prem services, and I think there are still a lot of situations where you're going to use a cloud-based solution because it just makes sense. And if you can do that in whatever industry you're supporting, that's a good thing. But it's kind of the weighing back and forth. I want to take the last few minutes and talk about a subject of, there's a lot of fear out there of people that are saying that the cloud is taking their jobs. And does anybody want to speak to that? Those
I can jump in on that. That's basically just like I was saying earlier about the when SBS became obsolete, and we had the hosted exchange, and then we had the new server generation. It's very similar. When you build out a full, the terms IaaS, infrastructure as a service, and PaaS, platform as a service, and even software as a service, all these wonderful acronyms. When you look at these, infrastructure as a service is basically remove the physical hardware, but you still have to manage everything like as far as the OS is concerned, all the networking is concerned, everything else, and you have to do it in a way where it's secure, because now it's literally it was on the internet, but now it's on the internet. So those skills that you built up over the years, or in your in-house data center, your customer's data center, your customer's office, those skills are still deployable to manage this stuff. There's some new stuff you need to learn, but it's still there. Platform as a service. Pierre, could you talk about platform as a service?
Actually, I can. I was just waiting for my in to start talking about that. And if you don't mind, I'm going to actually share my screen.
Okay.
See if I can find it here. Can you guys see this? Let me know when you can.
Yeah, there it is.
Yep, we got it.
Okay. So the package software could be basically renamed to My Data Center, where you have to manage the physical, so the networking, the storage, the server, the virtualization, the OS, the middleware, the runtime, the data, the application. And there's two squares in there that I've actually omitted because they're constant across all four, and they're typically the bane of our existence. You know which ones I'm talking about, right? Users and access control.
Okay.
So when you look at infrastructure as a service, what we do is we manage the infrastructure. So the networking, the storage, the servers, and the virtualization layer, we manage for you, whether it's AWS, whether it's Azure or Google Cloud. That the IaaS platform or the IaaS model is always the same. We manage up to the virtualization layer. Anything that's inside the virtual machine, so the OS, the middleware, the runtime, the data, and the application, including the users and the access, becomes your responsibility. Somebody having a party?
That would be
Okay.
Corey. He's being serenaded right now.
Oh, that's fine. The platform as a service, it's basically the evolution of that. So we manage everything from the networking all the way to the runtime. So that's the IaaS, that's the web service, that's the SQL engine, that's the AD services. And all you need to worry about is the data that sits on it and the application itself. So if you're writing a web application, that's all you need to worry about is the code for your application, the data that sits in your database, whether it's SQL, MySQL. We have different ones that we support, and I'm sure Amazon and Google and others have their own. And in a lot of cases, we support the same. A lot of the open source we support. So that's all we have to worry about. So you don't have to manage all of everything below the runtime, but you have to manage the application and the data. So that makes your life a little easier. And then software as a service, which is really Office 365, where we manage everything up to the application, and the only thing you need to worry about is the users and the access control. So these are the three main cloud models out there, and depending on which situation you're in, you're going to be in one or multiple, because there's nothing that says that you can't mix and match. Part of your solutions being on infrastructure as a service, part of it being on platform as a service, and parts of it on software as a service. You could even have a web service running in PaaS accessing a database in infrastructure as a service. So all that is just one way, different ways to talk about the models of cloud services.
That's a great explanation, and I think that's really what it comes down to is us being able to use the different services for our customer base and taking care of them. And here's the thing: we still have to do what we've always done. Like I can't remember. It was I think Chad was saying that earlier. Is the skills you've learned from doing on-prem stuff, you're still going to do in the cloud. You still got to know how to do that stuff. You're doing a virtual server, whatever. You got to be able to look at those things and be able to fix them and adjust them, because again, Microsoft or Amazon or whoever is not doing that for you. They're just offering a server that you can basically put whatever you want on there. So I think that that clarifies that. I think, unless there's any lasting, yeah, go ahead.
Your question started with like, what about my job? Is the cloud going to take away people's job? Whenever I've had that question in the past, I've always answered with like a joke to start with, and then we go into the and the joke has always been, if your only job, if 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, all you do is rack and wire servers, then yes, you might lose that job.
Okay.
Yeah, when I first got into this business, I had a soldering iron in my kit. I don't have that anymore. So
Exactly. We need to evolve.
Gotcha. Yeah, I still unfortunately still have to use a soldering iron every once in a while.
I still have my crimp kits under my desk here, so.
I didn't say I don't have it anymore. I just said I don't carry it.
You don't carry it anymore, right? No, good enough. Guys, we've covered. There's so much more we could have covered on cloud, but we've run out of time, and I think we've done a great job. I want to take just a couple-minute break and send you guys that are watching the show live right now, send you over to the tab on the left, watch the segue video. We're just going to take a couple-minute break. Freshen up, whatever, and we'll come right back and ask your questions. So go ahead inside the chat, start asking your questions of anybody that's on the panel, and they should be able to speak to those questions. All right, we'll see everybody in a couple minutes.